On the very last day, on the very last pass, after going 1,200 miles, car goes to 599. And then the next month, we took it back down to Florida to do some more racing with it, and we went 577 at 260 mile an hour. And then drove the car to McDonald's to go get lunch.
Welcome to the HPA Tuned In podcast. I'm Andre, your host, and in this episode, we're interviewing one of the legends in the sport of drag racing, well, more specifically, the engine building side of drag racing, and this is Steve from Steve Morris Engines. Now, Steve has a long and rich history when it comes to engine building and drag racing specifically. His key interest, though, is in boosted engines. And we talked to Steve about the development specifically of his SMX billet engine. This is an engine that's capable of supporting, believe it or not, in excess of 4,500 horsepower. Not only that, you can drive it from one drag strip to the other because Steve is heavily involved in drag and drive events where not only are the cars laying down 5-second passes, obviously if everything goes right, they're also driving some 1,200 miles between drag strips over the course of a week. And this is incredibly difficult to do. So we talked to Steve about the development of this engine, how it differs from the 481X Pro Mod engine, how he makes it reliable on the street, where the limitations of this are, and how it was developed to power what is currently the fastest street legal car in America. And I say street legal, obviously in quotation marks here. It's probably unlikely this engine is going to pass any emissions testing, but however, it meets the regulations as they're laid down, so he can claim it for what it is. Before we get into our interview with Steve, for those who are new to the Tuned In podcast, High Performance Academy is an online training school. We specialize in teaching people how to build engines, tune engines, construct wiring harnesses. We also cover race driver education, fabrication, 3D modeling, and a host of other topics. You can check out all of our courses at hpacademy.com/courses. All of our courses are delivered via high definition video modules that you can take from anywhere in the world, provided you have an internet connection. This allows you to learn at the comfort of your own place and at your own pace. As a podcast listener, you can also use the coupon code podcast75. That'll get you $75 off the purchase of your very first HPA course, and we'll put a link to that in the description. Lastly, if you like free stuff, then I've got a great deal for you. If you head to hpacademy.com/giveaway, you will find our latest giveaway. We've always got one of these running. The giveaway could be an aftermarket standalone ECU, it could be a dash logger, it could be a tool set, it might be pistons or conrods or anything in between. But it's always going to be a great giveaway, and we will ship it to your door if you win free of charge. There's no catch here, no purchase required to get your name into the draw. So I highly urge you to go along and have a crack. All right, let's get into our interview with Steve now. All right, welcome to the podcast, Steve. Thanks for joining us today. And like always, let's start by learning a little bit about your background, specifically how you got a passion for cars and specifically drag racing as well.
Well, actually, none of my family was into automotive stuff at all. In fact, most of my family is into music. And so, except for one uncle, and I'll talk about him in just a second, but going through elementary school, going through junior high, I'm in band, I'm doing that kind of stuff. And going to band class, I would go past the auto shop and the machine shop and thought, you know what? That is what I want to do. I had this interest in cars and racing. And even though I had never been to a race, I didn't know anybody that raced. I'd never watched any racing. I didn't know anything about it. I just had this interest in cars and just in the engine and just I just was fascinated by it. So I would look at things and I'd buy magazines, that kind of stuff. Well, one day I dropped out of band class so I could go into machine shop class and auto shop. And never told my mom that I dropped out of band class. So she found out that I dropped out of band class when she went to go to a recital. And oh, by the way, I said, I'm not going to be there. I dropped out of band like 4 months ago. So she was not happy with me, but it's all worked out in the end. So I did that and went through auto shop class, machine shop class, and it really started just kind of getting more enthused about it. And I remember when I was in high school. So when I would have been 16, 17, 18 years old, I then all of a sudden, and I had never been to a NHRA drag race ever. In high school, they used to do this high school drags where they'd have the high school kids, they'd go out for a day and they could bring their cars and they could drag race them. So that was my first actual experience on the track with some being there. And I didn't even race anything because I didn't have anything to go, but I went there. And from that point on, I had this dream of, I knew what NHRA Pro Stock was when I was in that 18 years old or so. I said, I want to be building NHRA Pro Stock engines before I'm 25. So I had these little lofty goals,
Okay.
So I went to a trade school right out of high school, and they had a really nice automotive machine shop program. And, you learn the basics, how to turn machines on, very basics of the engine, little stuff like that. But it was a pretty good school.
Let's actually just stop for one moment there and just come back, because obviously what you had access to during your schooling sounds very different to what we have over here in New Zealand. So just, can you give us a quick sense of what the auto shop and machine shop, what did that sort of give you access to and teach you before we sort of go further?
Oh, yeah. They're pretty few and far between nowadays, but in our school, we had a wood shop where, they're making stuff out of wood, but we also had a machine shop where we had lathes, mills, welders, all manual machines. At that time, you're talking 1986, 7, 8. So I learned how to weld there. I learned how to use a lathe, mills, drill, just basic machine work. And then the auto shop, it had a nice auto shop. I think we probably had like 2 or 3 car lifts in there. And we learned about, brake jobs, a little bit on engine stuff, but, normal general mechanic kind of work right in high school.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, makes sense. All right. So now we get into the trade school where you're actually sort of consolidating that and going pretty deep down the rabbit hole.
Yep. So we're getting deeper there. And then, so they had a nice machine shop that still had all manual machines. Like I said, it was just, new CNC stuff wasn't available yet, but they had everything from crank grinders, camshaft grinder. And we used to use this. So there I learned how to grind camshafts off a master lobe profile. And the lobe was actually a machined lobe that was probably about 9 inches tall by about 6 inches wide, and it was the shape of a lobe. So, you could literally grind, and it was really barbaric, but it was it was really kind of interesting to do. Valve jobs, blocks, so boring, honing, decking, resurfacing, line hone, so I learned the basics of all of that. And that was a 2-year program. So when I got out of that, I had a friend that was into racing a little bit at that point in time, hometown friend, Bob Makeley. So his father-in-law was buying some parts from a guy at a small machine shop. And when I say small, it was a parts store machine shop that was probably, it wouldn't have been 1,000 square feet. This is small, really, really small. So I went with him one day, and the guy says, "Oh, you're graduating from that school. I could use somebody here." Offered me a job on the spot. So yeah, I went there and worked for Ken Felice was the guy's name, and he owned this little shop called The Machine Shop. That was the name of it, The Machine Shop.
Aptly named.
Yep. And so I went, worked there. He was getting to the age of wanting to retire, and he goes, "Hey," he says, "I think that you could make this, you could do this, and I'd be interested in selling this thing to you, and you could take over a existing business and kind of be ahead of the game." I said, "All right, let me figure out how to do that. I'm a 20-year-old kid with no money, so let me see how that works." But stuff was pretty cheap back in that day, so the whole thing was pretty cheap to do. I think I borrowed. In fact, I know I did. My mom and my grandma actually helped me to borrow money from the bank, and I bought that little machine shop.
So that was the basis of Steve Morris Engines today?
Yeah. So I was in business for myself at age 21.
Wow. I can only imagine at that point you had a pretty steep learning curve ahead of you. One of the elements we sort of talk about on the podcast quite often is sort of the skill set of being able to be an engine builder or a machinist versus the skill set of owning and operating a business effectively. And they are completely different skill sets. And quite often we see people get into business in the automotive industry because they're good at something, engine building, for example, or tuning, and then realize quickly that they can only actually put maybe 30% or 50% of their time each day into doing the thing that they're good at. And the rest of the time is quoting jobs, dealing with customers, invoicing, all of the other stuff that goes around running a business. So how was that learning curve for you?
Well, yeah, I did the exact same thing, which was I got into this shop because I wanted to do what I wanted to do. I wanted to build engines. To this very day, that's just what I wanted to do, is build engines. I mean, being in business is just a necessary evil of doing what I want to do. Yeah. So everybody does the same thing. And then my experience and learning curve right off the bat was I'm a 21-year-old idiot that has nobody helping me to run business. And so obviously in about 2 years, I was totally upside down. I was building little engines. I mean, a 500 horsepower engine at that point in time was a pretty big deal. And so I'm just building little stuff and circle track stuff and local machine shops kind of work, and obviously screwed that all up. So what I did was, there was another parts store machine shop that lost their machinist. I was kind of available and said, hey, why don't you just let's work together, and you buy all my equipment and I'll come work for you. So that's what the guy did. And so I went to work for another machine shop just down the road. I worked there for a couple years and things were going well. There's no problem. And one day, at this point in time, I can't remember who it was. So a customer actually had brought in a national dragster. So this is one of the first times I'd really actually seen national dragster stuff. But, I'm still thinking about this pro stock deal. I'm still wanting to build engines. I'm still processing this all out. And now I am 23, 24, something like that. And he brings in this national dragster, and the back of it was a help wanted ad for Dart cylinder heads for a cylinder head porter. Well, I was building engines, so I knew what Dart cylinder heads were. And it's like, oh, okay, they're in Michigan. They're only a couple hours away. All right, let me think about that. So I apply to there, and I come down for a working interview, and they come to me at the end of the interview and they said, hey, we think that, we have a job position coming up in the engine shop, the pro stock engine shop. And I go, really? And said, would you be interested in that? I said, heck yeah, that's my dream. That's what I'd love to do. Okay, we'll get back a hold of you. So this was like in June or July that I went down there and interviewed. And right around, I think after the first month, I didn't hear anything back from them. I started calling them. And so I called them every Friday at the same time until December. And in December, right around Christmas time. So now we're talking about 4 months. Every Friday for 4 months, I called these guys saying, have you made a decision yet? Have you made a decision yet? I'm ready to come to work. I'm ready to come to work.
You're just wearing them down.
I know, I just wearing them down. And it was right around Christmas time. Said, okay, we're going to give you a shot. You need to be here January 1st. January 1st is first work day. I go, okay, that's cool. I said, you mean January 2nd or January 1st? January 1st, be here to work.
I'm guessing the New Year's Eve celebrations that year were a bit subdued then.
Yes, it was. They do not care. We work. So I went there and was there on January 1st, and lo and behold, we worked a full day, and that's where I started at age 23-ish, going on 24, of being in NHRA Pro Stock Engine Room. And at that time, that was when McDonald's was sponsoring all the racing, and Joe Gibbs and McDonald's was sponsoring race cars. They were sponsoring Top Fuel, Cruz Pedregon. Can't remember who the Top Fuel guy was. Jim Yates. So we were building engines for Jim Yates and leasing engines to other people. And at that time, I don't know how we did all we did, because there was only two people that were doing it. It was Paul Hoskins and myself, and then Richard Maskin, which was the owner of the company, owner of the team, the owner of Dart. So yeah, it was a fascinating deal. And, that's where I gained a lot of my thought process and thinking about how to do things and what I wanted to do and how things need to be done.
So pro stock, naturally aspirated engines, very, very competitive. And from what I understand, a lot of regulations around what you can and can't do. What's the sort of process of development of one of those engines to try and find the next few horsepower to be better and faster than the next guy?
So at that point in time, I wasn't really on the development side of it. I got to see what was going on, see the thought processes, but I'm just there machining, ended up assembling, and doing stuff like that. Richard would always do all the dynoing himself. But I will tell you, this is one of my key points that I try to express to everybody. So I go there and I'm thinking, these guys know everything. They are currently national champion, NHA Pro. They are the Billy Bad Boys of everything. They know everything. All right. So on that first day, they're dynoing an engine. This is the first time I've ever seen an engine dyno. I mean, this is NHRA Pro stock. At that time, they were only 9,500 RPM. 500 cubic inch, 9,500 RPM. They would make about 1310 at that point in time. They're much better now. And I'm just enamored. This thing is just screaming. You're just a plexiglass window away from, this engine that's running in the dyno room, and it's just awesome. And this thing kicked a rod out of it right there. It was an engine that had already been running on track. The engine's name was Shelly. They named all their engines and with girl names.
Of course.
So this engine's name was Shelly, and Shelly lost her lunch, just gave it all up. And this is what I remember the most about, and how I always try to explain things to people is, so I'm just in shell shock. I don't know what's going on. And they both look at themselves, and they probably would, well, Richard's dead now, but Paul might not even remember it. But I remember them looking at each other and thinking, and they said to each other, Richard asked Paul and said, well, what happened? And Paul goes, I don't know. Let's go figure it out. And that was it.
So they didn't actually have all of the answers there and then.
We don't have the answers. We're experimenting, trying, and you're figuring stuff out, and this fails. That doesn't work. This does work, and we're just always doing something. And that's where I picked that up right away. It's like, all right, you guys don't know everything. So then I'm at the racetracks and stuff, and I'm with the likes of Warren Johnson, all of these big name people, and I'm just a peon there with all them at that time. But I had this immediate understanding that these are just people that are figuring stuff out. They don't know everything. They're figuring it out.
Yeah, I think it's always tempting to look in from the outside and think that people at that level, yourself included, have all of the knowledge. But the reality, and this is why I'm still passionate about the automotive industry, is no one knows everything. Technology is always changing. There is always something new. There is always more to learn. That keeps it interesting, I find anyway. Do you sort of agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. I'm the epitome of I don't know everything. What I have going on for me is experience. If I tell my kids, and I'll tell my guys that work for me, that if I say, I know this or do this because this is going to happen, it's because I experienced it. I know because I've already screwed that up 5 times. If I say, I don't know, I think we should do this, or maybe we could do that. If I don't speak in absolutes, it's because I don't know. I'm not absolutely sure. I'm experimenting and trying to figure something out,
I think it's also fair to say that there aren't a lot of absolutes in this industry. It's not a lot of black and white. It's a lot of shades of grey. That's sort of how I look at it. So you go to 5 different high-end engine builders that are all getting great results, and they're all going to have their own take on things and all going to do things just slightly differently. So yeah, I think that's important to understand. Obviously, you got a really good start there learning at DART and seeing how these pro stock engines are built and developed. Where does your timeline go from there?
Well, at that time, so I had my older son. I had a lot of stuff going on. So I had gotten married, had a kid, all in this point in time, my son Tyler, and now I'm at DART and I'm a few hours away, and that bug bites me again. It's like, hey, I can go do this on my own. Hadn't learned the lesson the first time. So, it's like, okay, I think I can make this all work. Now I got all this experience. Still it never dawned on me that I didn't have one single lick of business experience, which was what the problem was in the first place. But I had a bunch of other experience there, and I just wanted to be closer to my son. So I wanted to move back home, and, didn't like the 3-hour drive to go spend some time with my son and whatnot. So I wanted to be closer. So I decided I was going to come back out and open my own shop again. And at that point in time, I had some old customers from when I was in that area moving, back home. And one of my customers said, "Hey, I have a pretty big garage. You could move in here." So I started from that point. So this would have been in 1996 or so. And I would have been 26. Yeah, 26. So I started hunting around for some used equipment and starting to build this little shop again. And that's basically where we started from. There's a bunch of long story with partners and stuff like that. You want to talk about partners, I'm more than happy to talk about that. But there's...
What I'm interested in, obviously you had that first experience that didn't go so well. I think you said you're about 21 back then. You sort of said you're in this position where obviously you've got a lot more experience now in the engine building development side of things, but what was different this time with the business side of things? How did you deal with that and overcome the problems you saw the first time around?
Well, like I said, I didn't really learn my lesson from the first time, but it was fairly frugal at the time. So I have this little shop out in the middle of nowhere. I have some customer base now, and I'm starting to develop it just a little bit. And then one of my customers came in and said, "Hey, I think you could be a whole lot bigger, badder, better. I think we could partner up and I could provide a building and we could do this and do that." And so I thought, all right, let me think about that. And I can help you run business, because he was a business guy, general contractor is what he was. And so I thought, okay, that kind of makes sense. So I partnered up with him. Oddly enough, I fell in love with his daughter, married his daughter, who I'm still married to, going on 25-year anniversary here in November. Yeah, so I'm still married to my wife, but that partnership didn't end up well with my father-in-law.
Okay.
Like I said, it's a long story, but what my problem was this is something that I tell people too that are trying to get into business is, if you're the talent and you're the worker like what I was, sorry, you're really going to have to figure it out, because if you're going to go looking for a partner that's the business guy, it's very, very hard to do. You got a business guy that's running business, and you got somebody that's talent, that's the enthusiast, and it is astronomically hard to make that work. And so, long story short, obviously now I do not have any partners. I do everything exactly the way I think it should be done, the way I want to do it. And now successful, because I'm not having to rely on somebody else, or not even asking somebody else's opinion, except for my wife. And, it's like, hey, so I tell everybody, partnerships are extremely hard. And if you're looking for a partner to be the business guy so you can build engines and have fun, you're probably not going to end up well.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some statistics out there on failed partnerships, and that probably 9 out of 10 don't work out. It is very, very difficult to get a partnership that's going to work, and there's always sort of gets to a point where, I'm doing more work than he or she is. This isn't fair. So it is very difficult. It can work. I mean, I've got a business partner that I've been working with at HPA now for probably upwards of 12 years, and that relationship has worked and stood the test of time so far. But I also understand that I'm incredibly lucky, and that is rare in this industry. On that note, now with no partners, are you still doing the business side of things yourself, or have you brought in other people as employees to do that?
No, I have had to learn and have learned a lot of business principles and what's going to work, what's not going to work.
What would you say your biggest lessons then in the business side of things have been over the time you've been running?
Currently, I ended up having to sell a whole bunch of that equipment to help pay for bills and do stuff. And it's like, you know what? From here on forward, no partners, and I'm not going to get in debt. I am going to get the equipment that I need to do the jobs that I need to do right now. And then I'm going to save my money. I'm going to keep on building. I'm going to build up. And that's exactly what we've done through here. So, I mean, people can come through the shop now, and I've been in 1,000-foot shop with just a couple pieces of equipment. And now I'm in a 15,000-foot shop with 5-axis CNC machines and 4-axis machines, 3-axis machines, 3 dynos. I mean, all this stuff, but I built all that stuff up. I built the dynos myself, everything from the carts to the stands to the absorbers. Don't do electronics. I make sure that I got the work first to get the equipment. and to do the equipment.
So you didn't just go get a 7-figure loan and buy all the equipment in one shot and then try and figure out how to make it pay for itself.
Yeah, in my opinion, that's a recipe for disaster. And then on the non-fiscal side of it, I also figured out in 1999 is when I started doing boosted stuff, because then I have all this pro stock experience, but there's no way I was going to be able to get into pro stock. I didn't have the resources. I didn't have the clientele. I didn't have anything to make that all work. So I'm building everything. I'm just doing circle track stuff, nitrous. I was doing anything and everything that I could, but I had started making the determinations like, you know what? I need to find my niche, and I'm going to find that niche. Well, that niche was boosted engines. And so it was all the way back there in 1999 that I started making the move to, this is where I want to be. This is how I think I need my niche to be. And from here on out, I'm a big proponent of telling people, stay in your lane, find your niche, stay in your lane, and do it really, really well. Now, I will diversify out quite a bit, and I'll kind of bump in little areas, and I'll kind of try some different things, and maybe a different engine platform, or I'll come over here and maybe a little, but it's all a little more vertical integration instead of horizontal integration. I'm not really dipping out on a whole bunch of different stuff. It all fits inside my core. Yeah, sometimes the stuff doesn't work, sometimes it does.
Yeah, sure. All right, well, let's get a bit of a lay of the land now, maybe sort of a 30,000 foot view of what the business looks like today. I mean, you mentioned, I think it was a 15,000 foot premises, 3 dynos, a bunch of CNC machinery. How many staff have you got, and where are you located?
We're in Michigan. We're right off of Lake Michigan. Really, it's actually a very nice area up here, but not super cold like people think it is. We're in 15,000 square foot. And even this building is something that I progressed up through because, all the way from that 1,000 square foot to, I think it literally went into like 1,000, 2,000, 3,000-ish square foot as I was renting buildings, continuing to grow. I'd add a little bit of, I'd buy a used piece of hone or a used mill, or I'd buy something, and then, okay, I'm getting a little bit bigger and I can move up. And then I was getting to the point where it's like, man, I'm in this little 3,000 square foot building. I need to get something bigger. So I found this building that I'm in, and it was 15,000 square feet. And it's like, oh my gosh, it is twice as big as what I need. So I talked to the landlord and I said, hey, is there any way you would, divide this building in half and rent it to me? And he said yes. And so we kind of worked out a deal. And then later on, he comes in, he goes, you know what? By the time I divide this whole thing all up and do this, says, it's going to cost me too much money. Why don't you just rent the whole building? I said, well, I can't afford to rent the whole building. He goes, well, what can you afford? And I said, I can afford what I was going to pay for half the building. And he goes,
clearly.
And he goes, okay, whatever. And he just released me the entire building for what I was going to pay for half of it.
Perfect.
And then in 2015, so this was 2012. So, I mean, there's a big gap of just trying to build things up and continuing to improve what I'm doing and learning and trying to figure stuff out. So, and then 2015, he comes to me and says, hey, I think I want to sell that building. And so he gave me just a absolute smoking deal, and I bought the building. And I'm looking around and I'm thinking, okay, this is crazy. Now I'm bought this building, and what am I going to do? It's empty. There's nothing here. I only needed 7,500 foot, and that was 7,500 foot to grow it into. And right now, forward another 8 years or whatever it is now, and this shop is entirely full. I think we're at 45 engine jobs sitting on the floor right now. I have 6 people on staff. I really should have about 8. And ultimately I'd love to build another 5,000 square foot because I don't have any room for my race car stuff. So I'd like, so it's just progression. But the biggest thing I learned is take your time, stay in your lane, do the best you can at what you're doing right now, and just don't go crazy and spending money on stuff you don't need to do.
Yeah, I think that's really sound advice. All right, let's get into the engine side of things a little bit more detail now. Kind of got the background. Obviously you build a lot of engines, as you mentioned. You're sort of primarily focusing here on boosted applications, which is great. That's kind of my key interest area as well. One of the engines I guess you're best known for is the SMX billet Pro Mod style engine. Can you give us some sort of background on how that came to be? Because there's a big sort of disconnect here between building existing engines and then sort of waking up one morning and going, hey, you know what, I'm just going to design an engine from the ground up. You know, how did that all come to be?
Well, it's actually a fairly interesting story. So I'm building engines and I'm determined, okay, we're just boosted shop now. And currently I tell everybody that we only do boosted engines because I only do. I will not work on a nitrous engine. I don't care. Don't need to. Don't want to. Somebody else has got that niche. I don't need it. And I still love NA engines, but that's not really my niche either. So I don't want to divvy into that too much. But I was really had gotten involved because of a customer into the drag and drive fields. And so we were doing this drag and drive stuff.
For those who haven't heard of drag and drive, can you just give us a run? I mean, there's a bit of a hint in the name, but yeah, just explain it.
So in drag and drive, you're going to show up at the first racetrack with all your rig, whatever you got, everything there. You race at that track, but here's the key is we currently do 5 tracks over 5 days. Actually, it's actually 4 tracks over 5 days. So you start at one track and whatever you can fit in your car or pulling a trailer with your car, your race car, you cannot have a support vehicle. You can't have a truck, a trailer full of parts. You can't have anything. You need to have it either in your car or you need to be pulling a 4-foot by 8-foot trailer is as big as you can have. Whatever you can fit in there, that's all you have to go to the next racetrack, the next day, the next day, the next day, the next day.
And how many miles are we talking between these tracks that you're actually driving on the road?
In between, the least amount of miles was 100. The most amount of miles was in the 300s.
It's a real challenge you can make a car go incredibly fast on a drag strip, but doing that while still being able to drive at 100 plus miles on a road, that's a very, very different animal, isn't it?
It is. And these things and the problem with the racing is, I tell everybody, racing is not the problem. The drive is the problem. Driving these things is really hard. It's really hard on the car. The faster the car, the harder it is on the car. A 10-second car is nothing. Even an 8-second car really is nothing. 7-second cars are getting a little hard. 6-second cars are getting really tough. I mean, they're very hard to drive. They're prone to break parts because they're just not built to do that. And then, 5-second cars, there's only one, and, we're part of that program. So you really have to think your way through all that stuff. And there's a lot going on with the drive portion of it for sure. Because you're going to be sitting in a 300-mile drive usually takes us, because we have to follow a course. They don't just put you on a highway or freeway and tell you to go. You got to follow these courses through these little towns. And here a few years ago, for example, we went through Washington, D.C. So we're driving a 4,000 horsepower car through Washington, D.C., stuck in traffic. And we have sat in traffic. I mean, have a 4,000 horsepower, 3,000 horsepower, whatever it is, engine sitting, idling for 2 hours straight. I mean, those engines aren't really made to idle.
Of course, yeah.
You have oiling problems. You have a lot of issues with them. There's always cooling problems. It's tough. It's tough. So it took quite a while to learn all that stuff. But as I did learn all of that stuff, the primary thing that I was figuring out is we had to keep on stepping up the game. Because the goal then was we were the first car to go have a 6-second average at all 5 tracks. We were the first car to do that. Then my customer, Tom Bailey, he goes, well, we want to go faster yet. We want to be the first car to go 5s, to drag and drive and go 5 seconds in the event and still be driving. It's okay.
And that's a massive step up. I mean, for people who aren't involved in drag racing, it doesn't sound like a big step in terms of time. If maybe you're running in the mid-6s and you want to go 5.99, doesn't sound to the uninitiated like a huge jump. But I mean, that's a massive step, isn't it?
It is exponentially harder. What's required to go... I'm currently trying to get my car to go 5s, a drag and drive car. And the car goes 650s like a bracket car. It is exponentially harder and more horsepower to go that next half a second faster. And for example, I know for a fact we have to leave with about 400 horsepower more on the starting line just to pick up a couple hundredths there so we can pick up a few hundredths down track more, and so we can pick up a couple tenths. I mean, it is astronomically hard. Then aerodynamics start coming into effect. I mean, there's a lot of issues, a lot of problems.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the other element here as well is I'm assuming when you're at 4,000 plus horsepower, It's not just a case of throwing more horsepower at the car, because you've got to match the power to the available traction, of course.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you have to make the car work. And that is the 6-second cars, the cars really have to work. We can build a 7-second car out of just about anything. I mean, anything, and we can make it work. We can power it down the track and make it go 7s. Not a problem. 6s, better have a car that's working. Otherwise, you're really going to be struggling and you really can't do it. And 5s, you better have all your crap together, because it is exponentially harder. I mean, for people, it's hard to even give a proper analogy to the difference in it. It is so big, just massively big.
Sure. Just a side element here. I'm just sort of imagining these 4,000 horsepower cars cruising around through Washington, D.C., as you mentioned, and I'm wondering what the legalities are and the road registration status is in the US, because I'm sort of thinking if we tried doing that here in New Zealand, you'd probably be locked up and the key would be thrown away, probably crush the car. So how's that work? Do the police just turn a blind eye, or is road registration there kind of a little bit more lenient?
Yes and yes. I get these kind of complaints every once in a while that people don't, think it's fake or something like that. But in Michigan, my car is a 93 Caprice station wagon. It makes 4,500 horsepower. All I do is they don't care. They don't look at it. They've never looked at it. I go to the licensing bureau. I hand them the title and title. They give me registration and a license plate. That's it. That is it.
Sounds easy.
There are no emissions testing here. There's nothing. So in the United States, because we can do that in Michigan, now you can't do that in California, but
yeah,
I can, because my car is registered in Michigan, so my registration carries over to California.
Right, okay. So you get a bit of a free pass on that one.
We get a pass on everything. I've never seen, as of yet, have cops be upset about anything. Usually, most of the time, the police are sitting on the side of the road watching the cars all go by. So, it's kind of cool. It's a novelty thing. As long as people aren't doing something stupid, it's not a big deal.
Yeah, common sense sort of comes into it. I mean, if you're doing a big smoky burnout or 200 mile an hour on the street, that's probably going to be a very different deal. All right, well, let's get back to your progress here. So you've got your customer who wants to go into the 5s, and I'm guessing at this point you're sort of realizing the limitations of the engine architecture you're dealing with.
Yes, and what got to be the problem was then the conventional big block Chevrolet platform is not going to work. All the pro modified platforms are all waterless, so that's not going to work. So it's like, okay, so we're going to start building and trying to develop custom one-off 5-inch 4-space engines. I'm trying to develop all this stuff. And the problem with them is they'll make all sorts of horsepower, but any of these engines that make this kind of horsepower, they will break some parts. And what the problem is it's a custom one-off engine. It's not like there's parts available. So then we were always having to go back, and if we broke something, it was like the end of the world. I mean, it's like, all right, I got to go back and redo this. We're waiting for months to get parts. And so the one customer, Tom Bailey, he jokingly says, he says, you know what? Wouldn't it be cool if we showed up with a 481X engine, which was the current pro modified engine at the time, wedge engine. He says, we'll weld water nipples on it and we'll put a radiator in a car and we'll just race it and tell them that we have a water jacketed one, and then just make them all freak out, because they'll be all freaked out. But we'll just race it. We'll not do the drag and drives, but we'll just go play with it. And I thought, that would be pretty interesting. And that got my wheels turning, because I literally he had a 481X. I literally did weld water nipples, 2-12 water nipples on it. We were putting it in the car and hooking up a dummy radiator with no water in it, just so it would look like it was a drag and drive deal. But that got me thinking, is like, that platform is just a excellent, exquisite platform for a wedge deal. And I think I can design that and make that work into a water jacketed drag and drive, endurance type engine, but still have that architecture there with this durable 4,000 plus capable, lives, happy, easy to service, parts are plentiful, no big deal. And that's what I did. So my SMX engine will take the block and heads are the water jacketed pieces, and those are mine. But I don't want to reinvent the wheel for everything. I have no desire to reinvent the wheel on anything, to tell you the truth. I'm making things better. I'm seeing what things are wrong, what we can do better. So people that, why don't you build it with 4 overhead cams and all this other stuff and blah, blah, blah. It's like, no. Look,
it's proven it works.
This is a proven piece. It works.
Yep.
I can make this better and fit in a different application. And that's what we do. So my SMX engine does take most all common 481X parts, the same crankshaft, gear drives, pans, distributor, oil pumps, everything.
Makes a lot of sense. You've got a developed engine that's well proven. Obviously, it has no water in it, so it's not going to work for your application. But yeah, now you don't have to make all of the parts from scratch. You can just concentrate on those core elements, the head and the block. So all of the architecture essentially is similar or copied from the 481X, just with the addition, in a nutshell, of water jackets.
Water jacketing, I did change the head bolt pattern because I wanted to have a more symmetrical head bolt pattern, and they didn't want to go through the intake port with a head stud. I didn't care. So I have put a 1/2-inch head stud right through the bottom of the intake port where you have access hole through the top of the intake port. So that's why my heads and blocks do not interchange with their stuff. Just all the internal components do.
Of course, there'd be no benefit in interchanging the heads and blocks anyway, because you get back to this same problem.
Yeah, you get back to the same problem.
Okay. All right. So in terms of the design of the parts, the machining of the parts, and then the validation, are you doing all of this in-house, or are you outsourcing any of the actual machine work? I mean, you said you've got, by the sounds of it, an incredibly well-equipped CNC machine shop.
Yeah, well, I've been adding all that stuff because I was outsourcing a lot of that. So at the time we would have I think I had just 2 engine dynos and basically manual automotive machine shop equipment and a couple 3-axis machines, just regular mills. So we were trying to make parts, but the block and the cylinder heads was stuff that I was having outsourced. Currently, we're making the cylinder heads 100% ourselves for my SMX and my SML. The SML is the little brother of the SMX LS platform kind of deal, but the same thing, all billet. And so we're making the heads in-house. We do intake manifolds, almost all parts except the block, but now we're finishing the blocks because it's been a real cluster cuss with blocks, to say the least. So we're struggling our way through this next batch of block, and we're finishing up them ourselves here. So we're doing that. And then ultimately we might, I don't know. I mean, I add equipment because I need that equipment to do the work I need to do now. But that piece of equipment is $1 million+ machine that I need. That one's a big chunk of change to bite. I can't do that right now. And I have the manpower. I could probably do it. I have a really good guy, but I don't want to bite that bullet just yet because I don't see the return on investment right away on that one. That one's tough.
Yeah, I guess you're sort of investing that sort of money in a piece of equipment like that. You'd really want the thing just about operating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to make it pay for itself. In terms of your production, can we get a sense of how many of these SMX and maybe the SML engines you're actually turning out every year?
It's pretty minimal, actually. So we went, basically, Tom Bailey, he actually got the second one, but we were the first ones out with that one. He was the first one out with the SMX. And we did go 5s. We were the first car to go 5s in drag week. On the very last day, on the very last pass, after going 1,200 miles, car goes a 599.
Perfect.
Yep. And then we took it to the next month. We took it back down to Florida to do some more racing with it, and we went a 577 at 260 mile an hour. And then drove the car to McDonald's to go get lunch. So it's a crazy car. So that was in 2020. That was the first one. So I now have, I think there is 12 of the SMXs out right now. So I mean, it's a pretty limited deal, but it's a very expensive deal. So I mean, you're talking about $130,000 engine. So that it's in a little different realm for people.
Yeah, I guess there's also a limited number of people that want to be able to go 5s in arguably stretch of an application as well. So that's going to limit your client pool. In terms of essentially taking a 481X and adding water jackets, on face value, I would assume that there would be some strength deficit because physically you just don't have as much billet material there. You've got to machine that out so that the water can do its job and cool. Is that the case, or is that not really an issue?
No, that's not actually the case. So, for instance, Obviously the block is designed differently, but there is no place in my block that has less than 3/4 of an inch. So, 750 thousandths of material in the cylinder wall, anywhere. And so I guess a very oversimplified view of it would be we plated a existing block. That is not even close to what we did. But I mean, we went around the outside. And so I looked at the water and how it flow and what I thought things should be, how I thought things would cool. And for instance, we don't run water in between the cylinders. I approach this thing as it's a mass of material, and I look at it as I'm using the mass of material as a heat sink, and I just need to remove the heat from the heat sink. So I left everything really big, really thick, really beefy because I needed all the strength in it. And then I just figured out how I was going to put water around all that, architecture is already there and make it flow properly. So on this engine, it has 4 water inlets. So each side of the block is fed separately. Each cylinder head is fed separately. And water does not cross mingle in between anything. So water comes in the outside of the block, flows around the outside, comes across the back through channeling, and then flows all along through the lifter valley and then back out the front. And then the cylinder heads basically do the same thing. The cylinder heads are a little more complex because water goes in, up and over, and then back all the way through, both sides of it. So it's a little more complex than the cylinder head, but the block is actually pretty easy.
Is there any sort of modeling that you did there to try and ensure that you're getting even distribution of the water? What I'm getting at here is you obviously don't want maybe the back combustion chamber, cylinder head, or block running hotter than the front, for example.
Yep. I have not done any kind of analysis like that. I do 99% of what I do looking at it, thinking about it, testing it, trying it, then building it. So, I mean, I very, very minimal.
The actual validation of it.
Yeah, that kind of stuff.
Well, I guess your validation really comes from driving 1,200 miles and running 599.
Yeah, basically, and sitting in traffic, sitting there running for 2 hours straight, just sitting there idling with no airflow. So I mean, yeah, it doesn't hurt parts. It doesn't do anything like that. It's been a very reliable, very durable engine. And what you usually will find in this application in particular is problems are outside. So anything that is affecting the engine from the outside, whether it's transmissions, blowers, turbos, fuel systems, something is failing that causes an engine failure. It's pretty rare. Once you have an engine that's developed and it's a good engine, we both know if you run it out of fuel, you're going to hurt it. If you run it out of oil, you're going to hurt it. If all these other little outside things, if they fail, you're screwed. I mean, it'll hurt your engine.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how good the engine is, realistically. So on that note, I guess, so 4,500 horsepower, it's a pretty big number. Where are the mechanical limits as you see them with the engine combination as it sits? How far can you push this beyond that power level? And what would you need to change if we get to a stage where those power numbers now start climbing towards sort of north of 5,000 horsepower?
I don't know what the current breaking point would be in the engine, because we haven't broke it because we're putting too much power to it. The only time we've ever had any issues is because some outside source. And then oddly enough, I don't have the big strive to be in that 5,000 horsepower area because there really currently isn't a use for it. Take, for example, let's say somebody said, hey, I want you to build a 6,000 horsepower gasoline engine or methanol engine for drag and drive application or for land speed. It doesn't matter what it is. It's like, well, you don't have a car that can do that. There's no application for it. And that's actually where we run into is we're making more power right now than what the typical, especially a drag and drive, this kind of endurance application can do. I mean, it just can't do. And the engines don't end up in a legit pro modified car, a super lightweight, purpose built pro modified car only because my engine's heavier. My engine's heavier because I built it that way and it has water, and then you wouldn't be utilizing half of it. So that's why it's not in the pro modified stuff. So there's no application for it yet. And it takes, like Bailey, when Bailey went 577, 260 mile an hour, his car weighs 2,900 pounds, which is overweight. And, it takes 4,500 horsepower to do it, about 45 to 4,600 horsepower to go that mile an hour in that car. And that is like a miracle for that car. And, cars are, I think the fastest door car right now is still only in the 540. So, I mean, it's not, which is significantly different, but they get there because the car is better.
Yeah, understandable. All right, a couple of elements I want to sort of dive into a bit more detail. So first of all, head gasket sealing, this sort of is the crux of any high output turbocharged or supercharged engine for that matter. And I've had more than my own fair share of problems with head gasket integrity with sport compact engines. Obviously, it's a different deal when, again, you're designing something from scratch to solely perform in this application. But can you give us a sense of what you're doing here with the head gasket technology? Is this a conventional sort of copper gasket with an O-ring and receiver groove? Yeah, what do you got?
Yep, so we do a fire ring receiver groove copper gasket. So it's currently still the same thing that all the nitromethane cars do. It is the best way of doing it as far as I'm concerned. As far as like deck thickness and cylinder head thickness, because the way I have things water jacketed and running water through the cylinder heads, running water through the block, in all areas around the combustion chamber and around the cylinder sleeve all the way down, there is no water there. So it is literally 3 inches thick at minimum.
Wow. So you got that integrity of the material there. It's just not going to move around.
We have all the integrity of the material. There's nothing moving around there. So currently, even when we've lost injectors and burned up pistons, hurt parts, hurt connecting rods from burned up injectors, like I said, fuel is always the number one killer of any boosted engine. It's fuel. So far, we've literally knocked pistons out of an engine and rod out of an engine and put head gaskets back on because it's held so well. It's the clamping power. It just picked on something else instead of hitting the head gasket.
Yeah. I mean, you've got an advantage here again with this design. You've got more head studs, and as you sort of mentioned there, you've got the head stud running through the intake port. So you've got those studs sort of located so you don't have too much sort of material gap, I guess, between the adjacent studs. So it's really equally clamping the head down. In terms of not running water through the block into the head, which is what we see in a conventional production engine, in a drag application, the last thing we want to do is end up having a head gasket failure, pushing water out and ending up with water under the tyre. Obviously, that could be a very, very dangerous situation. Is that why you go away from running the water between the block and the head like that, or is it for the integrity that it gives with that nice solid surface?
Yes and yes, because I wanted them always to be dry decked for the standpoint of not blowing water out on the tire. And the way the water works and this plumbs through it, it actually would have been harder to run water through the deck surface than where I'm doing it, because I can't connect passages, it's when it's billet, the difference between the billet and cast piece is if you can't see it, you can't machine it. If you can't machine it, it can't be there. And a casting, there's all sorts of stuff that's there that you can't see.
You got a lot more flexibility.
Yeah, you can't see water jackets in a cylinder head. I mean, you can't see all of it. There's all sorts of hidden nooks and crannies, all sorts of hidden stuff. You can't do that when we're machining. So it would have been actually harder to go through the deck surface the way I do it.
Another element here with the billet material, and this is a conversation that's come up sort of time and time again with people I've interviewed, and I'm talking more over here about maybe some of the billet sport compact engines and their streetability. More specifically around the thermal expansion coefficient of the aluminium alloy that's being used and how that sort of grows as it heats up and how that affects aspects like your bearing clearances. So essentially the sort of conversation here is that at room temperature, the bearing clearances will be relatively tight and then they expand. So you have to be very thorough with the way you warm the engine up. Is that an element with your SMX engine as well?
It is, and it's actually something that I had to get around because, so if we go back to the way that the engines are used, so the actual application for it, the way this is actually working is we're on the racing's easy, right? So we make the pass. That's a normal deal. We go make this drive where the engine we have, not on the SMX, but on other engines, it's very common these things overheat. If you don't have enough radiator in them, they'll overheat, period. So they'll overheat, they'll do all this stuff on the road. And then they go sit in the hotel and overnight, and whoever it is that owns this car wants to get out and it's, 60 degrees, 50 degrees in the morning at 5 o'clock in the morning. They just want to start the car and go drive it to the track, not preheat it, not do anything. They just want to just go jump in their car and start it. So now we have to account for this engine being excessively hot, 210, 20, 30, 40 degrees, and drive stuff. It has to make power. It has to have proper clearances to not kill itself on the track. Can't kill itself because it got too hot, and it can't kill itself because it was too cold. So, I mean, for instance, go start a Formula One car up without preheating it. Oh, that's right. They don't. They won't even roll over.
So there's the same situation you get yourself in where you have to spend the time and preheat everything before that initial fire up?
No, nobody does. That's my point. So we keep on trying to figure out, and there's little things that we have to do to band-aid some things over. So in this application, because nobody is going out and preheating anything up, they're going to start this thing up stone cold and take off down the road and then expect it to make 4,000 horsepower 30 minutes later. Point blank. So believe it or not, in this particular application, you can't have too much oil pump. So these engines have a lot of oil pump, and I run a straight 70 weight oil in these engines. So these things will run 130-ish pounds of oil pressure down track, but they spend hours and hours and hours and hours idling at low RPM or driving at low RPM with 20 pounds of oil pressure, with 210, 220 degree oil temperature. But it allows me the clearance to be able to, and I could make all that better. If somebody wanted to preheat their engine before they started up, I could tighten up clearances. I could make a lot of stuff a lot better, but I can't do that. I have to figure out ways of making things easy for people, and nobody wants to preheat these engines.
So essentially what I'm picking up here is that you're running really what would be a looser bearing clearance cold in order, and obviously that's allowing the engine to run when it's cold, so no preheating. But on the flip side of that, really at high operating temperature or normal operating temperature, that bearing clearance is then going to be significantly looser than what would be ideal, and you're making up for that with more oil volume to maintain oil pressure.
Bigger battery pumps and better oil, thicker oil. Yeah.
Okay. Can you give us a sense of how much is that clearance changing from room temperature to, as you mentioned there, sort of 220 degree Fahrenheit oil temperature?
Usually about 3 thousandths. Yeah.
Holy. Yeah, okay. That's not a small change. Wow. All right, let's move on. The other element, I know a lot of people sort of think, you spend your money, as you mentioned, sort of maybe $130,000, and that's just the engine element. Obviously, there's all of the ancillary stuff that sort of goes into making this whole package work. So it's not a small investment. A lot of people would think, you spend that money once and the job's done, 4,500 horsepower, 100,000 miles of trouble-free motoring, and clearly that's just nonsense. What is the sort of service life of the components? How many passes down the strip can we get before this thing's going to need to be returned to you for a tear down, freshen up? And at that point, what are the consumable parts in the engine? Is it literally the entire rotating assembly, all of the valve train gets thrown away and you're really just retaining the bare billet, block and heads?
No, so far, Tom Bailey has the most amount of hits on a crankshaft, block, and cylinder heads. We probably have, there's at least probably 200 or 300 hits on it. The problem with most of Tom's hits are, I guess I can backtrack up a little bit. If somebody, just a normal guy, is going to go out there and the normal service life, what I like to do with people is, usually I say, you're probably around 75, maybe up to 100 hits at the track. Good hits. Every bad hit, every time, if you hit the rev limiter on track, if you knock the tire off and it hits the rev limiter, I'll tell people they need to knock a minimum of 10 to probably 20 passes off of their total.
Okay. What is hitting that limiter? What is it actually doing that's so hard on the components?
It is astronomically hard on connecting rods. It is most of the blower, like the screw blower guys or the roots blower guys in Pro Modified, if they knock the tire off and they ever hit the rev limiter down track, not in the burnout, not in the two-step, but actually down track, they replace rods at the track the next pass because they will break. Guarantee they'll break. So that little bit of unloaded rev, and in particular when it's on the rev limiter with misfiring and shake, I'm not sure exactly what it's doing other than it's ugly. It's pulling the rod apart is what it's doing. So it must have more tension on the rod and when it's on the rev limiter, because that's always what happens. They just kill rods. But other than that,
this is sort of a consistent theme I hear from people building or tuning engines at this level, that the rev limiter is something you want to avoid at all costs. I'm interested in your take, very similar. traction control, which typically is going to involve maybe an ignition retard, but more often if you want a really aggressive, to regain traction, it's going to involve a cut to a cylinder, so an ignition cut, and that again can be pretty devastating to engines when they're up around that sort of 4,000 plus horsepower mark. Is that something you try and stay away from as well?
I stay away from it. I only do my traction control strategies with timing. I've not done anything with ignition cut stuff. I have the capability of doing that through the EFI systems, but quite frankly, I'm afraid of it. So I don't do it. And I think in my application, when I say that we're going to have 75 to 100 hits and then we want to refresh it, that's on top of driving this thing for approximately, it's easier to say hours because when you just think about it in miles, it doesn't sound like a lot. But I mean, these things are driving, they never get shut off. They probably literally are just sitting there running for 40 to 50, maybe 60 hours. They're just running. So, I mean, it's still a cycling. So that's not hard on connecting rods or pistons, anything like that, but it is hard on valve train because it is still cycling. It is still going through all of the movement. It's controlled movement, but it still is doing the movement. And so it cycles, but those things, usually valve train problems are about the only thing we might have. Possibly a broken valve spring. Sometimes it might knock a rocker off of it. It's getting to be pretty rare because I did have Manton design a specific rocker arm for my SMX. So on that rocker arm deal, I made it so I want to make things easy for people to work on. I want to make it bulletproof. I want to make it easy for them to work on and less likely to screw it up by working on it. So all of my rocker arms are the same. So we're moving stuff around and, moving the stand and making stuff. So the intake rocker is the same as the exhaust rocker. So all the rockers are the same. No left, right rocker, no exhaust rocker, none of that other kind of bull crap. So that saves it, makes it easy and simple. And then we shorten this stuff up. So it's a really short, durable, very nice rocker. And then my camshaft profiles are really mild. So really work on the closing ramp side of things. So it's not killing parts.
So keep it as easy as you can on the valve train.
Yeah. Yep.
I just wanted to interrupt our interview with Steve here and just take a moment out to talk about a package of courses that I think you're really going to love if you're enjoying our interview, and that is our engine building starter package. Now, I know a lot of enthusiasts think that building their own engines is beyond them, but the reality is that any enthusiast with an eye for detail and a little bit of patience absolutely can assemble their own engines. And this package of courses will give you all of the information you need. It starts with our engine building fundamentals course, which covers the fundamentals of engine operation, the parts involved, the machining operations that you'll need. You'll also learn about the clearances and tolerances inside the engine, as well as how you may need to vary the factory specifications or clearances when you're building an engine that might be making 2 or 3 times the factory power and maybe revving 1,000 RPM higher in the rev range than stock. We then move into our practical engine building course, and this delivers a simple to follow 10-step process that you can apply to building any engine. The course is generic, so it doesn't matter if you're wanting to assemble a naturally aspirated 4-cylinder or a twin-turbo V8, maybe a V12, anything in between. It will absolutely work. By applying this 10-step process, each of the individual steps is relatively quick and easy to complete, and in no time you've got to the end, you've got a completely assembled engine, and you're going to have the confidence that all of the parts selected, the clearances inside the engine are correct. So when it comes time to start that engine for the first time, it's going to deliver great power, great torque, and most importantly, great reliability. Moving on from this, we're also including our How to Degree a Cam course. This is probably one of the most common upgrades people perform when building a performance engine, but timing or degreeing that cam is absolutely critical to not only getting the performance that that cam is capable of, but also avoiding the potential of damaging your engine with valve-to-valve or valve-to-piston contact. Again, this course is generic, so it doesn't matter if you're degreeing a relatively basic pushrod cam or a quad cam V12. There's also a step-by-step process that you can watch inside of this course. Both our practical engine building course and our CAM degree and course also include a library of worked examples where you can watch the step-by-step process being applied on a variety of different engines to really expand your knowledge. You can use the coupon code SteveMorris100, and that'll get you $100 off this package, and you are still protected by our 60-day no questions asked money back guarantee, so absolutely zero risk getting involved. All right, let's get back into our interview now. All right, the best laid intentions sort of aside, sometimes things go wrong, and maybe it's a fueling issue like you mentioned that hurts an engine. You've got, obviously, your customer's got a lot of money invested in this engine. What's the sort of recoverability if the worst happens and maybe it throws a rod out and windows the side of the block? Are these billet blocks repairable, or does that sort of end up finishing things off?
Nope, they're repairable. I mean, we treat them like what Top Fuel treats their blocks. I weld them up. I'll fix them. I fix my own. If you want to see a really good video, if you haven't seen it already, go back a little bit and search for the mass exodus video.
Was that the 8 conrods that broke simultaneously?
Yeah.
I have watched that one.
Oh, you have watched it? Yes, that is.
So that is interesting because it actually didn't window the block. You could see along the sump rails, it sort of pushed the block out a little bit, but it actually hadn't physically failed.
Yep. Yeah, that one didn't physically fail, and I did not window the block. I think I only had some 481X stuff, some solid engine stuff that had windowed blocks. I did not have a SMX that windowed a block yet. It probably happened at some point, though.
Okay. The other element here is that you're using a ductile iron sleeve, so these are replaceable as well. So, if there's damage to the sleeve, no problem.
Yeah, not a problem. We'll just knock the sleeve out, put a new one in. I had to do that on the Mass Exodus.
Okay. In terms of, when something does go wrong catastrophically like that, and again, this is something that we live with at this sort of power level, no matter what, unfortunately, sometimes things do go wrong. But my take on that is always, it's a case of understanding the failure and what happened so that you can address it and make sure that it doesn't happen again, because there's nothing worse than sort of having a failure occur, rebuild an engine at a significant expense without really getting to the bottom of the failure, and then of course it's very likely to just happen again, so you haven't really learnt from anything. But that's also easier said than done sometimes. When you've got a catastrophic failure that occurs at very high RPM, it does a huge amount of damage, so it can be quite hard to sort of pinpoint exactly where that failure started. What's your process with that? How do you go about it?
The first kind of things that I'm trying to look at and diagnose is I want to see if it's a design failure or if it's a material failure, or if it is a design failure or even a material failure, what would fix that? So for example, let's take a connecting rod. I have yet to see a connecting rod that somebody will correct me. I guarantee somebody will, but weight is not an issue there. I would rather have more material because the mass helps in that area, helps more than it would ever hinder, as far as I can see. So for example, if I've would have broken connecting rods, you start looking at stuff, and I've never seen a connecting rod that didn't come back with more material in different places to help it live at higher horsepower levels. To give a actual real world example, the very first set of Manton rocker arms we did for the SMX, this is when we did the 599 pass. So this is during that whole week. We were about 3/4 of the way through it. So this thing already had pretty close to 1,000 miles on it. We had gone multiple 6.0s and 16s, and we were just waiting to let her eat at the last day, and driving up to a gas station it broke a rocker arm. So I look at the rocker arm, exactly where it breaks, and it breaks at the ball side, the push rod side. And I go, I don't care what the FEA says. I'm telling you, I'm holding this right now. Yes, I go, I can tell you this thing literally it needs material right here. It peeled it away. Needs more support. It just needs material there. As well, I'll put more material there if you want to, but I'm telling you, it says that it's fine. Well, okay, but I'm just letting you know. So we added material to it right there, and then it went further, but we broke. This would have been like the next year, but then I still broke one, and I said, hey, I see where you added something here, and I go, just go plumb freaking crazy. I said, make it just like this. I said, I'm telling you, literally just add all this material over here. It's going to make it heavy. Don't freaking care. Add all this material right here because it doesn't, if it's light, but it breaks, doesn't matter. It just can't break. I'll figure something else out if it's too heavy. So my new rocker arm is, I mean, it is like, it literally, I think I made him add close to, 100 thousandths of material on each side of the rocker arm. It looks like big, bulky on the pushrod side, which the pushrod side doesn't matter in engine. It's the other side that it does. But, it's big, it's bulky, but you know what? It does not freaking break. And it has become a pretty bulletproof deal right now is the valve train on it. But, I just looked at it and said, nope, I'm telling you right now, this has got to have more material here. FEA says it's fine. Don't care. Put more material there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that at the end of the day, the FEA doesn't always perfectly correlate with what you do see in the real world. Obviously, it's a great starting place and a good guide to sort of at least know you're in the ballpark. But at the end of the day, if in the real world the parts are breaking, it doesn't, as you say, it doesn't really matter what the FEA says. All right, let's move on. There's a whole bunch more I want to talk about, and we're already going a little bit long here. One of the elements I'm interested in getting your sort of stance on here is with boosted applications, superchargers versus turbos. I must admit I'm a turbo guy, so I do have a dog in this fight. I am biased, but there seem to be the two camps are very divided. And then, of course, we've got centrifugal superchargers versus screw-style blowers. Give us your sort of rundown, pros and cons. What's your take if you could have any option?
Turbos are always better. They are always better than everything. But there are just certain little areas and certain little niches and certain classes, certain applications where if they're penalized properly, like what they always do, let's put it this way, because I understand Pro Modified the best or any of that type of car. If you took all the limitations off the turbo stuff, it would just kill everybody. Those cars are the most penalized cars, overweighted, underboosted. I mean, they just kill them to make other cars competitive. And I understand what's going on, and that's fine. But horsepower to pound of boost, there is nothing better than turbo, period. Don't care what they say.
Yeah. The argument there would be that the boost response or boost curve for the turbocharger is maybe its downside in terms of particularly low RPM torque, which to a degree kind of almost doesn't matter on the drag strip within reason. Yes, there's arguments towards that, but yeah, what's your take on that?
Now there is, I was going to go there because so take for example a screw blower car. Screw blowers, they are really cool, granted, that kind of instant horsepower. And I have yet to figure out why, because we can manipulate turbos so much, we can manipulate boost curves, everything. You can have the exact same boost curve, and it does make more horsepower, but it does not go down the track as fast as a screw blower. The screw blower guys would probably know a little bit more about it, but I kind of correlate it in my thinking to if you go make a pass down the track with a screw blower car, and you come back and take all the data from it and you go, okay, I will duplicate every RPM and every boost curve, boost number, which we can, that's no problem, duplicate it. It will not go as fast. It'll mile an hour faster because it is making more horsepower, but it will not ET faster than the screw blower car. That screw blower car will 60 foot and 330 faster than a turbo car every single time. So it must have something to do with the recovery, or the engine is seeing something, and I'm saying, we wouldn't even lose boost, but there's something about the engine and how it recovers and how it sees that screw blower that is different.
Interesting.
And it just flat out accelerates differently, even though it is technically making less horsepower than a turbo car, but it does accelerate. And I'm not exactly sure why that is. I don't know, to 100% truthful. But you ever listen to a screw blower car, they're insane. And they're instantaneous, and we can duplicate that, but not duplicate that.
Duplicate it, but still not get the same results, even though it's making more power.
Yeah. And like I said, they'll mile an hour, they'll go 20 miles an hour faster at the big end of the track, but they'll run slower ET. They just do not accelerate.
Yeah, I mean, the mile an hour numbers are well and good, but unfortunately we race for ET, and that's really the important part of the...
Yeah, when you're racing ET, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. All right, again, we could talk about this a lot longer, but I do want to move on and talk a little bit about the EFI side of things and tuning. And I mean, this is an area that obviously has seen huge amounts of development and advances, and I would pick between the two reasons we've seen over the last decade or more the power levels just sort of go astronomical, sort of exponentially increase, would be the advances in turbo technology as well as the advances in the ECU technology. Is that sort of, do you agree with that?
Yep.
Okay. In terms of the available ECUs, there's obviously a wide range. What have you sort of gravitated towards as your sort of ECU of choice?
I started out way back in 1999 when I said I'm going to make this boosted engine stuff my niche. The very first stuff I was doing was centrifugal supercharged, so ProChargers, with a blow-through carburetor. And they work great. And I did that for years. I was and probably still am the king of blow-through carburetors. I mean, we've done more and made more horsepower and figured out the limitations on it, probably more than anybody. But then I got into EFI. And my first EFI that I started working with was Holley. And the Holley system is really good. They've always treated me well. I like Holley, and I've never really deviated from it a lot. I'm using Fuel Tech on my own personal car. I really like the Fuel Tech system. They are racers.
Yeah, it's a very drag-oriented product, isn't it?
It's a drag-oriented product, but they have a lot of other stuff because they're out of Brazil, and I mean, they have the USA side here, but they have a lot of stuff going on. When I say the racers, I mean, they're not the business guys running a company. Holley's a little more big corporation, big business, and takes a little while to do stuff. You could call Fuel Tech and say, hey, and this would be the same for even like a Motec or Haltech or anything else, is you can call Fuel Tech and say, can you make something that would do this? And if they go, yeah, we can do that, they'll do it in like a couple days. I mean, they'll change software, they'll change program, they'll change a lot of stuff like on the spot for you if they think it's viable. Where if you want to have Motec change something in their software, they're probably going to laugh at you, and they'll maybe do it later, but
it's not going to be in a couple of days.
It's not going to be an instantaneous thing. And so I do primarily now, I can do all of them, but I primarily stick with Holley and Fuel Tech. It is, you know how it is. Learning curves and new software, even if it's doing the same thing, but learning new software is it is a mother trucker. And, some of the more complicated systems like the Motec or Mtron, I've done some stuff with Mtron. The fantastic systems. I understand. I get it. They do everything and wash my dog. I mean, they can make everything work, but for the vast majority of my clients, it's way too much.
Yeah, that makes sense. For those who want to learn a little bit more about the Fuel Tech as well, we actually have had Anderson, the founder of Fuel Tech, on the podcast previously. So we'll drop a link in the show notes to that episode, because obviously that goes pretty deep into their background and some of the development specifically around competition racing, road racing, and of course drag racing. So a really great system. I'm interested sort of with the drag and drive applications. We haven't really talked about it, but 4,500 horsepower, safe to assume you're running methanol fuel for the drag racing. Are you running a dual fuel system, so you've got pump gas for the 1,200 miles of road driving? And how does that work with the ECU? Is it a flicker switch? Have you got two separate fuel systems? Is it a case of draining the fuel and refilling it with pump gas? Yeah, give us a rundown.
My car and the typical cars that I set up will be dual fuel, so there'll be two separate fuel systems. We can run it with, depending on how we plumb it or how we do a couple little things, we can use the same injectors, or sometimes I'll use a separate set of injectors. So like my SMX has 3 sets of injectors in it. So we will typically use the underneath set of injectors as the drive injectors. And then the 2 primary injectors per runner up on top would be for the race methanol only. So yeah, we run hours and hours and drive pulling trailers on regular pump gas from the gas station, nothing special. And then we run them on methanol. That is one of the primary things that we also have to consider on the drag and drive stuff. I can make more horsepower. So you did ask that question before. I can make more horsepower because I can change camshaft profiles to make it more aggressive. I can add compression because they're way under compressed. They do not have enough compression, but I can't run as much compression because I have to drive this thing on regular pump gas, pulling a trailer with load. So I mean, I have to consider all these other variables. So there can be more power made, but we got to consider all the applications.
Just on that note, to sort of come back to the engine side of things, since you mentioned it, where have you sort of ended up with compression ratio to get that compromise?
On my SMX stuff, I'm just at a nice easy 10-1. And at that and everything is there, it's plenty tolerant of low octane fuel, 91. You could run 89 in it. You could run anything you want to in it, really.
I'm guessing like a little bit of common sense dictates you're sort of not going to be really feeding it to it and running sort of 30 pounder boost on the pump gas, are you?
Yeah, you're not. You're not. Some of the guys, I have run them on pump gas. I have in an intercooled gasoline SMX on 93 octane fuel. We made 2,000 horsepower, a little over 2,000 horsepower, and they'll live right up there. But it was just to prove a point because it's not a practical thing to do. I mean, there's no point in running it like that.
Yeah, you'd sort of just be living on the edge essentially and beating up on the engine a lot harder to say you can do it.
Yeah, just to say so. I mean, there's no point in it.
All right, I'm interested, are there any critical sort of software features you're using in those two ECUs that you've sort of stuck with that really help you with these drag and drive applications? Talking here, are you using closed loop fuel control, lambda control, knock control, anything like that?
I do not control stuff on my typical LS kind of programs. And that's always just a Band-Aid over bad fuel, point blank. Bad fuel or somebody that's abusing it. I mean, that's really all you're doing it for. I don't have any knock control, don't do any knock control in my SMX stuff. So I'd have to actually think about that if I even wanted to try to add it. Currently, it's not necessary because when we're just racing it, methanol is pretty hard to detonate unless you're really deadly lean. And then they have different problems anyways. Gasoline ones aren't, really good fuel. I haven't had that problem with them, so I haven't dove into there because it really usually is somebody's abusing something, not doing something right, that they're even needing to have knock control.
Definitely. I mean, my stance has always been on pump gas, yeah, it's definitely an advantage, but I mean, that comes down to how hard you want to lean on it. And I'll assume for the drive element, you've got a pretty conservative tune up there. There's no real need to be trying to lean on the timing and have it on kill on pump gas. That's what the methanol's for. And then as you mentioned on methanol, it's difficult to make an engine knock on methanol. And then at the power levels you're running, if you do run into some form of abnormal combustion, it's probably going to let you know in other ways. You probably don't really need the knock sense. It's probably going to have a rod exit the block and let you know that your tune-up wasn't quite on point. So, it's a relatively sort of not as critical, I guess, as a pump gas engine. What about elements such as your launch control and boost control strategies? We also sort of touched on traction control and the fact you're not running that, but I would sort of think your launch control and boost control.
No, I do run traction control.
Oh, sorry, you mentioned you're using retard though, no cuts.
Yes. Yeah, no cuts.
Yeah, okay. Well, talk us through some of that.
Traction control actually in the fuel tech is quite a bit nicer and easier to use than what the Holley is, in my opinion. So in fuel tech, I use engine RPM and drive shaft RPM combined for traction control. So if it exceeds engine RPM through my curve, it'll hit a timing retards. And if it also hits through the drive shaft curve, it'll hit timing retards.
So you're sort of profiling out what that should look like on a hooked up pass that's perfect. And if it exceeds that, it essentially means you've broken into wheel spin.
Correct. Yep. Yeah. You're always starting. Yeah. All traction control basically starts from a good pass. You're basically trying to work backwards from there. So you always have to have some kind of good curve. It's nearly impossible to come up with a curve on your own. So you find something that's reasonably good, and then you can just start sneaking up on it and try to see what the car will handle or what it'll do. But the track conditions change so often, it's a little tough to do that. But in a drag and drive deal, because the deal with drag and drive in particular is the holy grail, what everybody is trying to achieve, because we end up having to drive these cars for 8, 9, 10 hours after we make a pass, is everybody wants to show up at the track, make one pass and leave. That is what you want to do.
So you're not just doing laps at the track.
In these kind of cars, you just can't make laps at the track because it's so hard to do. You can't come back and service them or, just do fuel plugs, look at stuff, make changes, get back out there. I mean, it's just really tough. So, a couple passes, if you ended up having to make 2 or 3 passes a day instead of one, that's a difference of about 4 hours. And that is the difference between you getting back at the hotel at 10 o'clock at night or 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah. That's tough, particularly after a week of it.
Yes, after a week of it, yeah. So that's what you want to do. So in doing that, there's a compromise. So, I mean, we're not making a pass, coming back going, yeah, I think I can lean on it harder right here. I can do this harder. It's like, nope, time to go. Bang, let's go. I think about it on the drive. and then maybe I'll try something at the next day and hope that it goes well. But I never put enough into it to just take a chance of spinning the tire, getting out of control, because I don't have enough time to recuperate from all of it because of the drag and drive event. If it's when it's a regular race, like we're going to a race this weekend and we're not going to do it, it's not drag and drive, it's just a regular race. Oh, now I'll just, every pass, I'm just going to sneak up on something. And if it doesn't go well, it's all right. No big deal. I'll just come back later and do it.
Yeah. I guess that makes it hard as well with the drag and drive. If you're doing that one pass, like you say, you sort of want to start somewhat conservative and make sure that you're not going to end up turning the tires, but then taking what you learned from that track and applying it to a completely different track, probably slightly different prep the next day. It's chalk and cheese, right? You can't really apply what you learned at one track to another specifically.
Yeah, pretty much. I think that in a car like mine or a car like Tom's, we got a pretty, like Tom's car, Tom Bailey's car, because it's lighter, that car will go 6.0, 16, anywhere. It'll go 630s lifting, or it'll go 630s on a part pass. And that's another thing of, how exponentially harder it is to go that next up. That car literally goes 630s lifting at the 8th mile.
That's nuts.
But to go 590s is a entirely big freaking deal. Yeah.
And again, that's that incremental element that isn't obvious to those who haven't actually tried doing it themselves.
Yes, exactly.
All right, let's just talk a little bit about the boost control strategy. What are you doing there? Obviously, we've got the ability to vary the power versus with the boost curve, and you can vary that relative to the speed, whatever, down the track. Are you sort of ramping the boost in as you go down the track, or is it run a relatively flat boost curve?
So we're ramping it in. So currently I'm leaving on 14 pounds of boost, and I'm at 40 pounds of boost by 2 seconds in.
Okay. And that's 40 PSI for the rest of the pass?
Yeah, because I'm still sorting the car out. So that particular tune-up right there will go 650s, 660s in my car, like a bracket car. That's not a big deal. So what I'm doing is I'm currently working on the strategies of I've got to get my 60 foot down. I got to get my 330 down. I can make it run out the back door. That's not a problem. But there is math that is not overcomable. And if it does not go, if I do not go 1.0, I could probably go 106, 105, 60 foot, and I have to go 270 something in the 330 and 390. If I do not go that in the 8th, you cannot put enough horsepower to it. I mean, there's not enough horsepower to put to it to make it go in 5s. It is just pretty near impossible.
Yeah, so trying to fix a poor short track performance with more power in the deep end of the track is a very difficult way of trying to make up ET. I always worked on the basis of if you could gain a 10th at the 60, that kind of equated to about 2/10 in ET at the end. Is that sort of math about right? I mean, obviously there's variables in there, but is that a good rule of thumb?
No, that math still seems to apply even in a 5-second or 6-second car. If you can pick that up in the 60, that's a big freaking deal. So currently I'm like 112, have been 110, but typically I'm 112, 113, 290, 3, and 430. So there is not enough power in the world to make my car go 590 doing that. I have to pick that up. So that if I could pick it up a 10th in the 60s, that'd be freaking huge. That'd be real huge, because then I probably could power it all the way through. If it worked that well, then I definitely could go a 270, and then I could definitely go a high 390. It'd be the minimum I would need to go in the 8th mile to go 590s.
Okay. In terms of that boost range, sort of 14 PSI into the 40s, typically you probably struggle in most instances to do that with just using boost pressure from the manifold or the charge piping. Are you running CO2 for that application?
Yep. So I use CO2 right now. I've been using electronic wastegates. I really like the electronic wastegate, but I have had just a couple random problems with the wastegate. And like I said, in drag and drive deal, it's a total loss. I mean, it is not just like one test pass is wasted. No, it's like a day. So I've gone back to using CO2, but I really like to use electronic wastegates. And I'll talk more and more with TurboSmart about that. They got the best thing out there. And I'm not sure if it's a controller issue, a heat issue, if it's a drive issue. something's happening to the wastegates because I'm driving them. They're sitting there 1,000 degrees for 8 hours straight. I don't know. Something's happening to them. It's very handy to not calculate out what kind of dome pressure I need to add to something to make X amount of boost. Because on the electronic gates through Fuel Tech, you say make 40 pounds of boost, and it just makes freaking 40 pounds of boost. I mean, it just does. And it follows a curve. It does everything nice. It just, you just tell it what you want it to do. You don't have to figure out, okay, I got to add 45 here to make 30 here. I mean, it's just, I don't have to do any of that math.
A much simpler system.
It is simpler.
And I like the idea, the concept behind the electronic wastegate makes a lot of sense. And I mean, I love technology. So far, I haven't personally had any hands-on experience with them. And, I think you may be the third person I've talked to now who has seen some kind of issue with them, which makes me think that, there's possibly a little more development still to go before they're, maybe rock solid. And particularly at the power levels you're sort of talking about, you don't want to be having problems with your boost control strategy, right?
Yeah. You just better make sure you have your safeties on. If it catches it, they're pretty fast. I'll give them credit for that. They're gonna keep on going through it. If you really think about what you're asking this electronic motor, the screw with the either still like a plunger style. So, I mean, this screw is, you're asking a lot.
Oh, absolutely.
For this thing to make those kind of changes and move and stuff and everything that's going on there. And it's electronics, so it's bound to fail at some point in time. That's just all electronics fail, especially when they're in that environment with heat and all that other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's a nasty environment, particularly with the proximity, obviously, to the turbo, the exhaust manifold. I mean, yeah, it's asking a lot for sure.
Yeah, yep.
All right, Steve, look, we've gone pretty long here, and I do want to respect your time, so we'll move towards wrapping this thing up, although I think we could probably talk for another hour easily and still not cover everything that I had on my list. But we'll finish up with the same three questions we ask all of our guests. And the first of those is, what's next in the future for you and your business?
Currently, we are bringing more and more stuff in-house. I think we might do, after I get everything all hammered out in my the SMX is done. There's really not much left to do with that. Minor improvements, The SML, I'm pretty much done with, but that's really looking good also. So I might take on another engine platform. I don't know. I got some people are interested in a 2JZ deal. We do the Barra. So how do you say that? Barra?
Barra on this side of the world, but I mean, it's an Australian deal, so kind of, I think we've got it right. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think we got it right too, but I think it's Barra, but they keep on getting corrected on it. But anyway, so maybe something like that. I mean, I might do, like I said, might do another engine platform, some kind of billet, bigger horsepower, something neat, something kind of cool. And then the primary deal I got going on is my son Kyle, so he's my youngest son, wants to take over the business. He's been working here since he's 5. He's 22 now. And so, we're going to be transitioning over to be the family business, and he's going to be taking over and doing this.
Awesome. Cool.
So that's all up on the horizon here, and adding the race shop next door, Lord willing, would be kind of cool to get all my get cars and maybe a little bit of fabrication. Just someday, my reward in this whole deal will be Kyle is taking over the engine shop, and I get to go play.
Yeah, cool.
And I'll sell, and I'll go race, and I'll help him do everything. But someday won't be all my deal.
I mean, that sounds like the dream lifestyle. I could get behind that. All right, next question. Is there any advice you'd give to a younger version of yourself to help reach where you've got to today in your career faster? Yeah, maybe avoid some pitfalls that you've seen along the way.
Yeah, if we talked about it a little bit, find your niche, stick in it, be the best at that you can be.
Be careful of partnerships, maybe.
Careful of partnerships. Don't spend money you don't have. If I would have done all those things, I would have been way farther ahead. That's one of those things I look at, what I'm going to hand over to Kyle is, I've worked through all those things. And so I expect him, since he doesn't have to work through all the things that I worked through, I expect him to do bigger, badder, better things than what I've done. So that's my goal, is he better not he's not going to have to work his way through all the little bull crap that I did to start from nothing, so I want to see him do well. So that's what I recommend to everybody. Just watch your money, stay in your niche, stay in your lane, do the best you can at it, and don't spend all your money.
Fair advice. I mean, I think sometimes it's worth also saying that some of the sort of hurdles that you've overcome that you've mentioned in this episode, and the other obvious hurdles that people always go through in life. You can only really learn from the hurdles that you go through. It's very, very hard to learn from someone telling you, oh, don't do this, don't do that. It's like, oh, what do you know? I know better. But the reality is these are hard-learned lessons. And hopefully if you can impart those on Kyle and he doesn't have to learn them himself the hard way, all power to him. All right, last question for today. If people want to follow you and see what you're up to, where are they best to do that?
Yep, you can go to SteveMorrisEngines.com. We have a really good YouTube channel where I do a lot of tech videos, and I try to share and show everybody the real side of engine things. So, I mean, I don't cover stuff up. I show you when I fail, if I screwed something up. In fact, I'm watching a customer walk in right now that I'm fixing his engine. It cost me dearly. Because when I did the balancing on this engine, I put the Mallory metal, actually Kyle did it, but I put the Mallory metal too close to the edge of the crankshaft and it threw the Mallory metal out. I mean, it broke it. This is a big dollar engine and this thing just cost me dearly because it wasn't his fault. It was my fault. Forget why did I even tell you that? Because he just distracted me. What was I telling you that for?
No, I mean, I think I've spent a fair bit of time on your YouTube channel. I do highly recommend to our listeners to get involved, and I've really respected that approach that you've taken of complete transparency and honesty, because unfortunately in the industry, and I see this with tuning shops and I see this with engine builders, they quite often tend to hide what's really going on. That instance there, most engine builders would probably somehow try and put that back on the customer. It might be a tough one, but they'll try.
Yeah, that was a tough one. I probably could have gotten away with putting it back on him. I mean, he probably would have paid it. He would have been mad, but he probably would have paid it. So, I mean, I show that stuff on YouTube. So the YouTube is really, really the best place to see what we got going on, to learn. And we're trying to show people, I'm trying to get people to understand. One of these things that, people need to understand too is, and I've explained it in some of the breakages that I've had and been experiencing, is this stuff breaks. What we do is we abuse stuff, see what breaks, fix it, and try to make it so it doesn't break again, right? That's just the nature of all racing. That is racing. If you can't afford to fix it, then you can't afford to race it.
100% agree. Yep.
That's it.
Yeah, it's a bit of pill to swallow, but yeah, you've got to have the financial resources to be able to essentially walk away from a catastrophic failure and do it all over again. And if you're not prepared to stomach that, then that's not the game for you. I think that's probably good advice for most customers looking to get into racing. All right, Steve, as usual, we'll put links to your social media and your website in the show notes as well, just to make it easy for people to find. Look, really appreciate your time today. It's been a great episode and really appreciate you giving us some insight into your business and your history.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
If you enjoyed this episode of Tuned In with Steve Morris, we'd love it if you could drop a review on your chosen podcasting platform. These reviews really help us to grow our audience, and that in turn helps us to continue to get more high quality guests. To say thanks, each week we'll be picking a random reviewer and sending them out an HPA t-shirt free of charge anywhere in the world. This is also a great place to ask any questions you might have too, and I'll do my best to answer them if your review gets picked. So this week, a big shout out to Rubes from Australia, who has said, Andre has a great ability to unpack the knowledge of the excellent guests. He then makes the information very approachable and understandable. The podcast is such a great wealth of knowledge. Thank you, and please keep it up. Well, great to hear you're enjoying the podcast and learning something while you're listening. If you get in touch with your t-shirt size and shipping details, we'll get a fresh tee shipped straight out to you. All right, that concludes our interview, and before we sign off, I just wanted to mention, for anyone who's been perhaps hiding under a rock and hasn't heard of High Performance Academy before, we are an online training school and we specialize in teaching a range of performance automotive topics, everything from engine tuning and engine building through to wiring, car suspension and wheel alignment, data analysis, and race driver education. Now remember, you've got that coupon code. You can use podcast75 at the checkout to get 75 $75 off the purchase of your first course. You'll find our full course list at hpacademy.com/courses. Important to mention that when you purchase a course from us, that course is yours for life as well. It never expires. You can rewatch the course as many times as you like, whenever you like. The purchase of a course will also give you 3 months of access to our gold membership. That gives you access to our private members only forum, which is the perfect place to get answers to your specific questions. You'll also get access to our regular weekly members webinars, which is where we touch on a particular topic in the performance automotive realm. We dive into that topic for about an hour. If you can watch live, you can ask questions and get answers in real time. If the time zones don't work for you, that's fine too. You're going to get access as a gold member to our previous webinar archive. We've got close to 300 hours of existing content in that archive. It is an absolute goldmine. So remember that coupon code podcast75. Check out our course list at hpacademy.com/courses.